Hi there, I'm Brian, and I'm going to be joined by other librarians from the Lincolnwood Library as we talk about podcasts today. We'll go through what podcasts are, their history, and how you can use them. We'll give you a basic understanding of how podcasts are made and give you examples to try out. We won't get too technical, and as long as you have a bit of knowledge of technology, you should be able to use what you learn to have fun with podcasts. So let's get started. So what are podcasts? They're mostly spoken audio recordings that can be downloaded or streamed, played, on most any modern technology device. We'll talk a bit about how podcasts are made later. For now, the three essential elements of a system that helps you with podcasts are 1. Finding audio recording, 2. Displaying them, and 3. Playing them. The word podcast comes from iPod and broadcast. Podcast. Let's talk about the history of podcasts.
As we review the achievements of this session of the 73rd Congress,
podcasts are similar to radio broadcasts, but adapted for new technology. Podcasts go way back to the early 2000s when they were sometimes called audio blogs. You can probably hear why that name didn't stick. Audio blogs? This website here was one of the first websites or any sort of combination of technology that included finding audio files with a feed aspect and the ability to play those audio files. It was and is just a website that lacks a lot of the helpful features many podcast apps have today. Here's its publicly available code that anyone can see. So it's not as accessible as modern podcast applications. A BBC journalist suggested the name podcast in 2004 before Apple even formally supported podcasts in 2005 in iTunes. They've gained popularity significantly since about 2014 when their quality started increasing significantly. There are many types of podcasts.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jane Houston-Jones at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California.
Some podcasts simultaneously produce video content, sometimes called vlogs or just good old-fashioned videos. Some podcasts are super formal, others are more informal. Let's explore the types of podcasts. Many are split up into episodes. Some are limited series podcasts. Some are ongoing. Some people do podcasts as a hobby. Other people make podcasting their profession. And some amateurs even become professionals. Some podcasts include advertising.
So Malcolm, this is the first we've ever done this. In fact,
Yeah,
I was
exciting.
thinking of an analogy, and it would be kind of like if we put the Ford Mustang on display at GM's big auto show. I mean, we've never promoted a competitor, but
This podcast often has ads like this for car companies. And some podcasts are funded by major production companies. Some podcasts are enticements toward paid services, like many Spotify exclusives. Many present true information, while others are for stories, comedy, or other improvisation. Some podcasts are scripted, planned out, and produced in great detail. Some podcasts feature monologues of only one host, and some have two hosts or more, of course. Many podcasts are structured as interviews, while others sometimes feature debates. There are also how-to and general informational podcasts. And there are podcasts about news and current events. Podcasts often have one major topic that they cover, but some podcasts are interview shows and more broad-ranging. They are often free, but some are exclusives of specific platforms that may require subscriptions. There are really more types of podcasts than we can talk about. There are so many unique choices out there. Apple has options for podcast creators to charge subscribers and takes a cut. How are podcasts made? Podcasters record the audio, mostly ahead of time, or sometimes live to air. Live podcasting is much more advanced. They can use simple recording devices like phone, voice, recorder apps. Or they can use high-quality microphones like this one. They also can use advanced audio mixer interfaces, and advanced audio editing software like Audacity. In the end, they generate an audio file, typically an MP3 file. These files are saved and put somewhere on the internet. Somewhere can be as simple as an open part of a website or as sophisticated as any of the many sources for podcasts. These audio files are often placed into feeds, often RSS feeds. Podcast directory apps can scrape these open feeds to provide lots of content for their audience podcast listeners. You can also manually add your podcast to major podcast applications if they don't find you automatically. Here's Spotify's page about getting started with that, and Apple's, and Google's, Stitcher's, and iHeartRadio's. You can make a podcast start to finish in our digital media lab. But remember, you'll need a website that offers up an RSS feed most of the time. There are lots of options for websites and content hosting that you'll have to explore if you want to produce a podcast. This one is free up to a certain limit and free for nonprofits. Blogs and other website creation and hosting services may also offer RSS feeds as a feature. For example, all WordPress blogs come with RSS feeds. Here's what you need to know to listen to a podcast. You can use a variety of methods, from simply downloading and playing the audio files in any media player to dedicated podcast apps to listen to podcasts. There are lots of podcast applications that do everything you need to listen to podcasts. Spotify does more than music and has lots of exclusive podcasts. We're showing this and other apps on one platform here, but most podcast applications work on just about any device. Apple is promoting podcasts and may have more exclusive podcasts as they add features for paid podcasts. Google Podcasts works on any Android device and has a very simple interface. And other podcast applications include Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Player FM, Luminary, Stitcher, and Podcast Addict. So there are a lot of podcast apps, and you can try out any or all of them until you find one you like. We'll briefly show you how to use Spotify on an iPhone, Apple Podcasts on an iPad, and Google Podcasts on an old Android tablet. So from my iPhone home screen here, I can open up Spotify to show you that. And you see at the bottom, there are different sections. I can go to search and then find podcasts. So the podcast section is a little more difficult to find than in a dedicated podcast app. Spotify also does music, but Spotify's interface is really simple. I can see categories. I can see what's viral. I can see best episodes of the week. And you can just also search. So I can display a specific podcast. I can download for offline viewing. And you can see all the episodes. You can choose to get notifications for it or follow a specific podcast. And of course, you've got your play button. So that is Spotify Podcasts. So let's show you Apple Podcasts on this Apple iPad. I've got it here. And you press it and it opens up. You see tabs at the bottom. The tabs and search allow you to find different podcasts to listen to. So I can press into search. And again, you see categories to browse. I'll go to sports. And I can take a look at ESPN Daily. So now I'm displaying the feed. I see all the episodes here. And you could play the latest episode or you can see the back catalog. So I'll press play.
Japan will win the gold in both the men's and the women's street competition. Yesterday it was Yuto Horigome. Will it be Momiji or will it be Funa? Well...
And I can press pause, and it integrates with my system audio player. And you can use all of the different sections at the bottom to navigate through this app. You can subscribe by pressing plus, see more options with the 3 dots, including unfollow. So Apple's iPad podcast app is very powerful. You can search and find and play all of the podcasts that their library includes. Apple Podcasts has most podcasts available. All right, let's open up Google Podcasts. So the Home tab shows you things that you have subscribed to and watched in the past. Explore allows you to find new podcasts. And Activity shows you what you have actually signed up for, what you've downloaded for offline, and your subscriptions. So I can go to Explore and browse and find podcasts. And I could search for podcasts. You could see previous searches I've done in the past. But I'm looking for a podcast called Main Engine Cutoff. And it came up right there. And I can find it. So I'll press subscribe. I can see all of the episodes. I can download one for offline, and I can play a podcast. Turn my volume up. So I'm playing the podcast, and I'll hit pause. And it integrates with my system audio player. So that is Google Podcasts. So dedicated podcast applications try to make listening to podcasts easy. And we hope you'll find an app that makes sense to you. These apps work on devices that connect to the internet to find and download podcasts and play them. The dedicated apps can help you subscribe to podcasts to see whenever new episodes are released. Using apps like these, podcasts play through your device speakers or wired or wireless headphones. There are often standard, quick controls for playing and pausing your podcasts that work just like playing music on your device. Using these apps to play your favorite podcasts and listening to the recordings is how you experience this fairly new form of media. You can start and stop the podcast whenever you like, and of course, you don't have to finish it if you don't want to. Podcasts are radio with choice. But like radio and other forms of media, only a limited number of podcasts really make it big. But there are millions of podcasts out there with narrower audiences. And some of those smaller podcasts may be the ones for you. So you can find the perfect podcast to listen to. So now we have just a few more examples before our librarians are going to make some recommendations. A lot of celebrities turn their TV or other exposure around into podcasting if they have a particular topic they're interested in or co-hosts they like to work with. They're jumping on the podcast trend to keep pushing out content to make money. Podcasts of all audience sizes are available to anyone, anywhere, and can be made by anyone, anywhere. But you might be interested in locally produced content. Hello from the Magic Tavern here is a Chicago-based comedic fairy tale podcast. It's a story. And there are lots of podcasts by librarians as well. And now let's turn it over to our other librarians to get some custom recommendations of more podcasts.
All right. Hello, I am Etty. I'm one of the youth librarians here at Lincolnwood Library, and I'm here to share some podcasts that I really love that I think you might enjoy, especially if you like learning about history. So I'm going to share a bunch, and hopefully you'll find something you're going to like. And if you want more recommendations, come find me at the library, because I love talking about podcasts. And so I'm going to get started with some podcasts that really helped me out during quarantine, things that I discovered then. And so I listen to a lot of podcasts. If I'm not, doing anything else, I'm listening to podcasts, or when I am doing everything else, I'm listening. And so one of my favorite podcasts that I discovered is NPR's Throughline podcast. It is a phenomenal podcast. It's hosted by Ramtin Arablouei and Rand Abdel Fattah. And Throughline is all about the connections between the past and the present. They basically show how current events are impacted by the past, and that they look at cycles and systems and patterns for us to understand what's going on in our world. Blows my mind every single podcast episode. There's so much that I didn't know and continue not to know, so I'm glad they're still making things. Couple episodes I'd highly recommend are the episodes about policing in America. The Octavia Butler episode is phenomenal. They have a couple amazing episodes that are super relevant. One is about the 1918 flu, and the other is about the history of masks. So you're going to want to check that out. So that's Throughline from NPR. The next podcast that's really been giving me life is It's Been a Minute with Sam Sanders. Sam Sanders is really knowledgeable about politics and history and culture. And so every episode, he'll interview people in the culture, actors and thinkers and creatives, with really thoughtful, sort of insightful and thought-provoking, and also just really fun questions. So it's not just like a regular interview podcast. And then he'll also include people from the news who know about what's going on and be able to bring lots of insights. And then there's always clips of people from the world sharing the best thing that happened to them that week. And that's the most powerful part, I think. And I always love listening to that. Another podcast that helps you rethink what you thought you knew, that's really insightful, is You're Wrong About. This is with Michael Hobbs and Sarah Marshall, and it's basically all about how reporting and news and stories we've been told oftentimes are very surface level and they're lacking nuance. And so they go deep into stories that really are just so eye-opening. There's so much, I'm excited when I learn things I never knew before. For example, I was a kid when Princess Diana passed away, and that's all I really knew about her, but they have this whole long series about her life, her history, her experience with the royals, which definitely feels very present right now. They have other episodes that are really, really powerful. They have an amazing series about the Newsboys strike of 1899, which, again, the only thing I knew about it was Newsies, which they talk about a lot, so I'm here for that. But also they have just a really fun rapport with each other. It's really entertaining, it's really funny, it's really biting sometimes and sarcastic, which I'm here for. But also just helps you really think critically about moral panics and moments we need to be more reflective and look for more nuance. So, highly recommend You're Wrong About. My final recommendation is for a podcast that's unlike any other. This is Unreserved. It was formerly hosted by Rosanna Deerchild, and now it's hosted by Fallon Johnson. This is from the CBC radio. And it is about Indigenous community, culture, language, specifically with Native and First Nations folks. I certainly didn't learn most of the histories and the stories they're talking about, so it's really powerful to be able to fill those gaps in my knowledge, but also just learn about Native culture and experiences and Indigenous folks right now doing amazing things, activists, actors, chefs, speaking up, learning those hidden histories and taking action to make change. So highly recommend Unreserved.
My name is Rich Izzo, and I work at the Youth and Teen Services Department. I've been listening to podcasts for like 14 years now. I've always been a fan. And so these are some of the podcasts that are among my favorites right now. The first one is called Sawbones. It's a podcast with two people. It's a husband and wife team. The wife is the doctor, and the husband's more of the layman. And they do like many different subjects, and they basically just discuss it. Many of the subjects they discuss are sort of like old wives' cures of the past and how they've been debunked over the years. The second one I listen to is You Must Remember This. It's been around for several years. I would say about every year, the host, Katrina Longworth, discusses like a certain period of time through say columnists of the time or actors. One of my favorite series from that is MGM, and she discusses the actors, their relationship to MGM, and it's just very engaging. I don't always listen to just ongoing podcasts. I also like those sort of like a mini series as a podcast, and one of my favorites right now is called No Place Like Home. In about 2006, the Judy Garland's hometown of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, has a nice little museum. But in 2006, someone brought in they donated ruby slippers. Actually, they lent them, and they were stolen. And you talk to the neighbors, you talk to the experts, you talk to the owner of the ruby slippers, and it's a wonderful mystery that lasts like over 12 years. It's really fascinating. And finally, I listened to this British podcast called The History of Rock in 500 Songs. The host will take one song by a specific performer or band. Like this week they did, he's profiling Ticket to Ride by the Beatles. And he just cuts through every aspect of not just the song, but the history of the song, the history of the band, before and after. And it's not just like, the really big hit bands such as the Beatles. He will go through the history of rock through older blues singers like Wynonie Harris, country singers, and old rock and roll singers that people might not even know anymore, such as Buddy Holly. All five podcasts I listen to, all the podcasts I listen to are just that kind of engagement, and just being sucked in to those stories is just, it makes me, I've learned so much from them.
I'm Seth. I'm the content manager at the Lincolnwood Library. I've got a few podcasts I'd like to recommend to you. For starters, This American Life is a classic. It's probably one of my favorites of all time. It's basically an hour-long weekly podcast that it started on NPR. It still goes on NPR. It's one of the longest-lasting ones they've ever had. It's hosted by Eric Glass. It's basically journalistic stories and essays and memoirs. They choose a theme each week, and then they parse it out into different acts. It's incredibly well-produced, and it's considered to be a pioneer of journalistic style podcasts. And in that vein, Radiolab is another one of my favorites. It's very similar to This American Life in a lot of ways, except instead of delving too much into human interest, it deals more with science and philosophy and political issues. It's another podcast that was made on NPR. It's long-form journalism. I've learned a ton from it. Jed Abumrad, who is the host for it, he's created a bunch of spin-off podcasts from it, and I've found those to be really stellar too. My favorite comedic podcast is probably Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. It's a favorite of a lot of people, and I think for good reason. I think he and Monica Padman have really good rapport with each other, and Dax is really honest about his flaws, and because of that, it makes his guests open up to him. And in addition to that, he's got a wide range of guests. It's anyone from comedians to scholars to political figures. And they just made the switch to Spotify, so that's kind of the only place you can find it now. And I guess the other podcast that's on my regular rotation is probably Song Exploder. It's hosted by Rishi K. Shirway. This is one of the bi-weekly podcasts. It deconstructs how popular songs are made, and you get to hear it directly from the actual artists that created them. I don't feel like you need to be a musician to fully appreciate this podcast because there's a lot of different non-musical things that happen in the production process. Sometimes it's about connections that they make along the way. Sometimes it's about a certain sample of a certain sound, or maybe where they get the inspiration for the song. I just think it's really, really cool. It's had a ton of big acts like Metallica and REM, but it's got a ton of small artists too. It's also won a bunch of awards, and it's also turned into a Netflix series since then. That is really, really good, and I highly recommend.
Hi, I'm Paula. I'm an adult services librarian at Lincolnwood Public Library, and I'm going to share with you the 4 podcasts that I listen to on my way to and from work. The first one is called Fated Mates. It's hosted by romance author Sarah McLean and romance critic and reader Jen Prokop. And they delve into not only the history of romance books, but new releases, as well as major themes in romance. It's a lot of fun. It's more of an adult podcast, so it is definitely not safe for work. I also listen to 99% Invisible, which is a podcast about how design affects our lives, whether we realize it or not. My other favorite is a podcast titled A Different Tweed, which is about fashion, the fashion industry. One recent episode has to do with the Halston Netflix miniseries and how the costumes were created for that. And then finally, Still Processing, which is hosted by 2 cultural critics at the New York Times. And they look at different cultural events and happenings in our world, as well as cultural figures. And they have some interesting takes on those. So those are the 4 podcasts that I listen to. Hope you will pick one of them and try one out someday.
So hi there, I'm Brian. I have been the narrator for the rest of this class, and I've been talking about a lot of podcasts. I just have one more that I would like to share with you, which is Our Ludicrous Future. It is hosted by Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, and a couple of his friends. They talk about SpaceX and Tesla and Neuralink and the Boring Company, basically all the stuff that that crazy guy Elon Musk is up to. They make it really fun. They're talking about science and they're joking around. They have a really good time updating about news and everything that is going on with those companies. Now, you see here I've pulled up their finale. Unfortunately, sometimes podcasts do decide to stop. These guys all are doing other things, and they decided to close up their podcast. So you can go through the back catalog of episodes, and their finale is really fun. They make a lot of predictions for the future. It's a great podcast, Our Ludicrous Future. So thanks for watching this video about podcasts. We went over what they are, how they're produced, and their history, and showed you many examples. You can see all of our events, resources, and ways to contact us on our website, lincolnwoodlibrary.org. We hope you've learned a lot about podcasts today, and will be able to find ones you enjoy and listen to them. Thanks for watching.